It can't compare to the notorious case of Michelle Blair. This is Michelle Blair, who is facing charges for multiple murders. Her case is one of the most horrifying and tragic stories of parental violence.
Struggle with them all the time. They were never there.
In a shocking and horrifying case that gripped the nation, Michelle Blair, a mother of 4 from Detroit, Michigan, murdered 2 of her own children and kept their bodies in a freezer for nearly 3 years. The gruesome discovery was made on March 24, 2015, when Blair was evicted from her apartment due to unpaid rent. During the eviction process, court officials stumbled upon a deep freezer in Blair's living room, containing the remains of her 2 children, Stephen Barry and Stoney Blair. The police were immediately notified, and it was determined that the children had been dead for at least 3 years. The medical examiner ruled their deaths as homicides. Michelle Blair was arrested and brought to trial, where she confessed to the murders of Stephen and Stoney.
To my understanding, to get a trial is to get to the truth, right? I'm already saying that I did it. I'm freely giving myself and accepting life in prison. My son is worth that to me. So what I don't understand is, from what I heard today, why the prosecutors are dragging their feet. If I'm already giving myself to you, like, hey, I did this, what's the problem? You get what I'm saying? I'm not gonna come back like, oh, I didn't understand my rights. I'm not a coward.
Michelle Blair's confession revealed a disturbing and tragic sequence of events. She claimed that she killed her 2 children, Stephen and Stoney, because they allegedly abused her youngest son, Matthew. However, these claims were never substantiated. Blair's confession stated that in August 2012, she discovered that Matthew was simulating inappropriate behavior with dolls and later learned that he had been abused by his older brother, Stephen. In a fit of rage, Blair physically assaulted Stephen, pouring scalding hot water on his private parts, making him drink Windex and choking him. Ultimately, Stephen died from the abuse. Instead of turning herself into the police, Michelle Blair decided to conceal her daughter Stoney's body by placing it in a plastic bag and storing it alongside her son Stephen's body in the freezer. This gruesome discovery remained hidden for nearly 3 years. During the trial, Blair showed no remorse for her actions, insisting that she did what she believed was right. In June 2015, she pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder and was sentenced to life in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Ionia, Michigan. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of parental abuse and murder.
You take responsibility of it. You're therefore sentenced to the Michigan Department of Corrections for the rest of your life without the possibility of parole, meaning, of course, that you will never get out.
Justin Ross Harris is a man who faced charges for the murder of his 22-month-old son, Cooper Harris, in Georgia. In June 2014, Harris left his son in a hot car for several hours while he went about his day. The tragic event occurred when Harris forgot to drop his son off at daycare and instead left him in the car while he went to work. The temperatures inside the vehicle reached over 90-32 DC, and Cooper died from heat stroke.
That's my patrol car. That's the vehicle I was driving that day. The blue lights, in fact, are the blue lights that I turned on when I first began driving up Cobb Parkway.
The father was supposed to drop the child off at daycare, but forgot and went to work instead.
Finished the work day, and then I was driving down Acres Mill. I caught a glimpse of him, and when I looked to my right to change lanes, I caught a glimpse of him in the back, and I thought I saw it. I thought I was seeing things.
Harris initially claimed that it was an accident and that he forgot his son was in the car, but investigators later uncovered evidence that led to suspicions of foul play. It was revealed that Harris had been engaging in an affair and had searched online about how hot a car gets for a child. Additionally, he was seen making phone calls and texting about personal matters while his son was trapped in the vehicle.
Evidence to show that he was in a vehicle that was maybe 90 degrees or 95 degrees, but less than 100. Could a person survive in that temperature in a vehicle?
Yes.
Looking at the totality of these circumstances, if Cooper Harris hypothetically was left in his vehicle at 9 o'clock in the morning and law enforcement were called sometime after 4 o'clock, is it possible he was alive around lunchtime?
If the temperature at lunch was only in the 90s, low 90s, yes.
Harris was arrested and charged with malice murder, felony murder, and second-degree cruelty to children.
Monica, show emergency. There's a baby on the ground.
June 18th, 2014, Vinings, Georgia. People at a shopping center watch in horror as a man pulls out a toddler's body from an SUV.
We don't know if the baby's breathing.
It doesn't look like it.
Do you see anybody around them?
Yeah, his dad, and it was like somebody trying to give him CPR.
During his trial, the prosecution argued that Harris intentionally left his son in the car as part of a plan to escape his responsibilities as a father, while the defense contended that it was a tragic mistake. In November 2016, Justin Ross Harris was convicted of all charges related to his son's death. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which many considered a fitting sentence for the heart-wrenching tragedy. The case sparked widespread debate about parental responsibility, negligence, and the consequences of such horrific actions. The father was supposed to drop the child off at daycare but forgot and went to work instead. When the father left work and began driving home, he discovered the child unresponsive in the back seat. Despite attempts by witnesses to resuscitate the child, it was too late. The temperatures that day exceeded 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and the interior of a hot car can reach temperatures as high as 130 to 140 degrees within a few hours. The child was left in the car for around 7 hours. The case of Justin Ross Harris and the tragic death of his son Cooper became a highly publicized and controversial trial. The evidence presented, including Harris's online searches and his behavior leading up to the incident, painted a disturbing picture of neglect and potential premeditation. Despite the defense's attempts to exclude certain evidence, such as the online searches, the jury found Harris guilty of multiple felony counts, including malice murder and cruelty to children.
How old were y'all when you met?
I was 18.
How old was he?
His 30s.
Did he have a wife?
Yes.
Did he have a kid?
Yes.
But he loved you and y'all were best friends?
Yes. We had sex.
Did he seem nervous or anything?
Not at all.
We'd talk about like everyday things and it'd get sexual sometimes.
Okay. And were pictures sent back and forth? And these are different parts of your body, private parts.
Discovered that he searched.
Harris was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his son's death, marking the end of a case that shocked many and raised awareness about the dangers of leaving children in cars. The outcome was seen by many as a just sentence for a crime that could have been avoided with a moment of responsibility. Thanks for watching. This shocking journey through these chilling cases leaves us with one question: how could anyone do this? If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about these cases and their sentences? Until next time, stay safe and take care.
Take a lie detector test to prove that I never abused any of Sonia's kids or never abused Giovanni and never intentionally meant to hurt Giovanni but to help him.
However, on rare occasions, the aggressors end up protesting in favor of the defendant, as seen in the case of Judge Tracy Hunter. As a former judge, Hunter has experienced a massive fall from grace and now finds herself before Judge Patrick Dinkelacker at Hamilton County Common Pleas Court in Cincinnati. She was originally convicted of charges related to abuse of power after leaking confidential documents to her brother, allowing him to keep his job as a corrections officer. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail, but with her extensive knowledge of the legal system, Hunter managed to drag the appeals process out for an astonishing 6 years, staying free while pursuing her case through the courts. However, she has now exhausted all avenues of appeal and is in court today to determine whether the 6-month sentence will finally be imposed. Unlike most defendants, Hunter has developed a cult following, with many reporters believing her conviction to be politically motivated. Crowds of supporters have gathered both inside and outside the courtroom, and tensions are running high. Unfortunately for Hunter, her luck has run out as Judge Dinkelacker orders that she serve the entire sentence, setting in motion an extraordinary chain of events.
1, you pay the cost of these proceedings. Number 2, you are to not violate any laws. Number 3, you are to do 6 months in the Hamilton County Justice Center, credit 1 day. Mr. or Ms. Deputy can take her away.
As the former judge stands, a collective outcry erupts from the gallery. Her supporters begin shouting in protest, voicing their discontent over the ruling. The deputies standing in the center aisle turn to the left, raising their arms in an attempt to calm the crowd. However, as they do so, a woman on the right-hand side of the gallery sees her opportunity and stands, rushing toward Hunter without interruption. As she nears her destination, the deputy closest to the podium spots her and frantically moves to stop her. The rising tension suddenly boils over. As one of the deputies moves to lead Hunter from the courtroom, she begins to struggle before going limp. By now, the gallery is in an uproar, and supporters cry out, "No justice!" The judge turned felon is then dragged unceremoniously from the courtroom. The woman who attempted to approach Hunter is handcuffed and led out of the courtroom by officers. The remainder of Hunter's supporters are still incensed as they exit, rallying outside the courthouse, chanting and marching in protest. Despite the chaos, Hunter ultimately serves just 3 months of her sentence before being released. While her support from the public was strong and the courtroom drama may have been out of line, the ultimate intention of her supporters was seen as morally upstanding. However, as we see in the next case, this isn't always the case. At the Marion County Judicial Center in Florida, Travis Davis has just been found guilty of first-degree murder, alongside co-defendants Brandon Banks, Kelvin Grimmage, and Kella Richardson. The 4 men are facing life in prison for shooting homeowner Courtney London during a home robbery in Ocala. Tensions are running high after the delivery of the verdict, and due to the known volatile nature of the defendants, extra deputies have been drafted in to maintain control in the courtroom. As the judge proceeds with the hearing, he asks the prosecutor if they can move forward with sentencing.
Any legal reason we shouldn't proceed with sentencing today?
Everything seems to be proceeding normally in the courtroom, but unbeknownst to everyone, things are about to take a shocking turn. Watch closely as Davis reacts just before the judge delivers the sentence. A deputy behind him attempts to cuff him, but Davis quickly yanks his hand away. Sensing the danger, the deputy immediately grabs Davis from behind, but that's when the situation escalates. A second deputy rushes toward co-defendant Grimmage to cuff him. As the deputy leans over the table, Grimmage pulls back. Davis uses his body weight to throw himself onto the table in front of him, while Grimmage joins in, grappling with the deputy and throwing punches. The chaos continues as both men are eventually dragged to the ground. Meanwhile, Davis is wrestled to the ground but manages to get back up, swinging his fists wildly as he lashes out at the deputies and even at his own defense attorney, who eventually escapes around the side of the table. With the courtroom in chaos, the deputy at the back steps in and unleashes his taser on Davis, causing him to fall to the ground. Grimmage and Banks are also tased, though Banks hasn't joined in the chaos. Luckily for Richardson, he had already been handcuffed and was rushed to the side of the courtroom when the melee erupted. The public in the gallery are up in arms, shouting and reacting to the chaos unfolding in the courtroom. A deputy orders them to leave, but many are reluctant to go, clearly upset by the violent disruption. The tension in the courtroom escalates as the deputies work to restore order and remove the unruly onlookers. The room is eventually cleared, and the deputies regain control, bringing Davis and Grimmage into the center of the courtroom. Although they ultimately face no charges related to the brawl, all 4 defendants in the Davis case are sentenced to life without parole for the murder. In such cases, the chaos in the courtroom has no bearing on the verdict or sentence. However, in the case of Carl Williams, the outcome of his trial was dramatically altered after a courtroom incident. Williams is on trial in DeKalb County for shooting and killing his girlfriend, Donana Jackson. He claims the gun went off accidentally while he was showing it to her. In the courtroom, after closing arguments, the jury exits and Williams stays behind to speak with his lawyer. The mood is calm until suddenly, a person from the public gallery rushes up to the defense table and attacks Williams. A brawl ensues, with fists flying as family members of Donana Jackson join in, swarming Williams. His defense attorney is caught in the chaos, pushed and pulled. Deputies rush in to separate the groups, arresting the individual who instigated the incident. Despite the warning, the woman grows increasingly belligerent, causing further disruption. The judge pauses the proceedings as the deputy climbs over the railings to address her directly, warning that another outburst will result in her removal. However, the judge has already had enough and swiftly orders the woman to leave the courtroom. The jury, who were in an adjoining room, hear the entire commotion, and as a result, a mistrial is granted to Williams. No retrial has been brought before the courts to date. The attack on Williams was a physical one, designed to cause as much damage as possible in a short amount of time. This is convicted drug lord Jose Gavia Jimenez. Police say that Jimenez was working with a Mexican cartel to operate a heroin trafficking operation that brought as much as 100 kilos of the drug into Columbus every month. The investigation resulted in the seizure of 25 kilos of heroin, which was worth a whopping $2.5 million. Jimenez pleaded guilty to 2 counts of trafficking along with 1 count of engaging in corrupt activity and is appearing at the Franklin County Courthouse today for sentencing. Far from the heights of his glory days, as the ringleader of a Columbus drug operation, Jimenez shuffles into the courtroom wearing khaki prison-issued scrubs. However, he hasn't completely lost his sense of steely command as he shoots a quick icy stare at the narcotics investigators who are in court to see their hard work come to fruition. Assistant Prosecutor Dan Stanley begins the hearing by making Jimenez's high-ranking position within the operation abundantly clear.
This is the ringleader of an organization that is so fear-inspiring that the people who come here from Mexico refuse to testify against it because they know as soon as they are born, their family will be murdered in Mexico.
He also speaks of the fear-inducing power of the cartel and the difficulties this poses when trying to obtain convictions against gang members. All the while, Jimenez maintains his stance, standing bolt upright while glaring into the distance. A female witness, who's not shown on camera to protect her identity, gives evidence to the court about how she helped him store and move heroin in the Columbus area.
He was bringing me the drugs to my house.
What kind of drugs?
Heroin.
How much?
1 kilo, and the last time 2 kilos.
Watch Jimenez as she testifies. You'd be forgiven for thinking he was a statue, but if you look closely, you'll see that he does in fact blink. The ringleader has been stone cold up until now, and his lack of remorse is about to get clearer as he addresses the court through an interpreter.
This has been overblown.
Y pido perdón por lo que yo he hecho.
And I apologize.
Jimenez stands and expresses some form of apology curtly in Spanish, looking as if he's choking on every word. His translator manages to make his words sound more human in English. However, Judge Kimberly Koft isn't buying any of his feeble regret, and she takes him to task on his claims that his accountability has been inflated by the prosecution team.
I'm surprised to hear you say today that your participation is overblown.
Judge Koft reminds him sharply that she informed him of his statutory requirements for a conviction before sentencing Jimenez to 21 years in prison. She also orders that the drug baron be deported immediately upon his discharge.
I was very intentional about explaining to you the statutory requirement for conviction.
Jimenez shows no reaction to the fact that he will be approaching 70 when he's released, and instead just saunters from the courtroom with an expression of disdain on his face. Jimenez's total lack of emotion is unnerving, and as we see in the next case, Dexter Lee Williams shows a similar level of catatonic coldness. However, in Williams' case, someone else is getting worked up on his behalf.
I'm talking to Mr. Williams. I've heard everything.
Right, but you're holding, no, what other accusations? He didn't testify, so you're holding what I said.
I've heard everybody.
The 53-year-old kingpin is just about to be sentenced at Houston County Superior Court after being convicted on 3 counts of violating the Racketeer and Corrupt Organizations Act. The conviction stems from drug trafficking charges brought against Williams, who police said was leading a multi-million-dollar trafficking operation between Mexico and Atlanta. When taken into custody, he had 39 kilos of cocaine in his possession, worth an estimated $3.5 million. Here he is, talking and laughing to himself in the back of the police car following his arrest.
Son of a bitch, they brought me that fast. I should have never walked into that fucking house.
Sentencing Williams is Judge Bo Adams, and he has some strong words for the defendant, who sits impassively in his seat.
In your case, It's not a mere possession case. It's not a mere struggle that you have with an addiction that you personally have. It is not that. You are, I would say, you are feeding the addiction that they're battling with, and you are profiting from their addiction.
While Williams might be unmoved by Judge Adams, his defense attorney, Wanda Jackson, is growing noticeably agitated by the judge's words. She sighs and leans back irritably in her seat.
You're convicted not because the court is underhanded or corrupted or is corrupt or anything like that.
It seems that the penny finally drops for the defendant. The sentencing is not going well for him. He shares a look with Wanda Jackson, and what happens next is something you don't see too often in a sentencing hearing. Williams continues to stare on without emotion, while Wanda Jackson, having heard enough, incredibly takes issue with Judge Adams.
We talking about for me, Judge? You holding what I said?
I'm talking to Mr. Williams. I've heard everything.
Right, but you're holding, no, what other accusations? He didn't testify, so you're holding what I said.
I've heard everybody. I've heard it all.
Who else said it?
I've heard it all. That's my time.
She attempts to scold him for insinuating that her defense case was filled with wild accusations, but the judge cuts her off and goes on with his speech.
Mr. Williams, you're convicted not because I'm corrupt or underhanded, or law enforcement is racist, or the jury had unauthorized contact with witnesses. You're convicted because you're guilty. That's the plain and simple truth of it. The evidence showed that, the wiretaps show that, and at the end of it all, I find that
Jackson, however, remains unimpressed and can be seen gesturing with her hands and huffing. Judge Adams ultimately sentences Williams to a total of 40 years without parole, and even the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison isn't enough to stir a reaction from the stone-cold dealer.
I would say you should be sentenced for your involvement, your participation in this racketeering enterprise, and your acquiring significant sums of money.
Jackson is less than pleased, though she gathers her things and stands to leave before the judge has a chance to finish speaking.
That'll be the sentence of the court as a result of...
Thank you, be excused.
All right. And at the end of it all, for count one, I will sentence Mr. Williams to 20 years to serve. Count two, I will sentence him to 20 years. And that will be consecutive to count one, and I'm going to require that be served. 20 years to serve. Count three, I already indicated that is merged with count one. So that'll be the sentence of...
For Williams, it was the allure of power and money that drew him to trafficking.